It was a Wednesday in early May, just past 2 p.m., when Ethan Parker began to feel something wasn't right. He was standing outside the family's modest beige home in Santa Clarita, California, a quiet, middle-class neighborhood just far enough from the noise of the city to feel safe. Birds chirped in the trees overhead. A delivery truck hummed down the street. But inside the house, there was nothing. Just silence. Teresa Parker, his mother, had always been the kind of person you could set your watch by. She picked him up from work on time, every time. She texted when she was running 5 minutes late. She answered her phone on the first or second ring. That was just who she was, reliable, present, grounded. But that day, Ethan had called 13 times. And every call went unanswered. He stood on the porch holding the grocery store apron he'd just taken off. His phone buzzed in his pocket, yet another call to voicemail. He frowned, gripped the doorknob, and let himself in. The house was cool. Too cool, maybe. The curtains were half drawn, filtering the sunlight into strips across the carpet. A pair of slippers sat neatly by the front door. Teresa's handbag lay on the dining table. Her car was still parked in the driveway. "Mom?" he called out softly. No answer. He moved through the hallway slowly, listening for anything. Footsteps, the creak of a door, the sound of movement. Nothing. Just the persistent whisper of running water from the back of the house. "Mom?" he tried again, louder this time. Still no answer. The sound of the shower grew louder as he neared the bathroom door. A low, constant rush of hot water, like white noise. That, at least, was normal. She could be showering, maybe with her phone on silent. Maybe she didn't hear him. But then again, she never left the water running like that for long. And she never left the door closed if someone was home. He hesitated a moment, heart racing, before placing a trembling hand on the doorknob. What happened next would never leave him. The door creaked open. And there, kneeling in the bathtub under the steaming water, was his mother. Teresa Parker, 58 years old. Still dressed in her bathrobe, soaked through. Her dark auburn hair hung limp around her face. Her lips were a pale shade of blue. Her skin was ghostly and cold. She wasn't breathing. Ethan froze. His brain could barely process what he was seeing. Everything in the room, the scent of lavender shampoo, the steam, the dull sound of water hitting tile, was sharp and yet surreal. Then instinct took over. He stepped into the bathroom, turned off the water, and gently pulled her out of the tub. Her body was limp, heavy, too cold. He laid her on the tiled floor and covered her with the nearest towel, his hands shaking as he fumbled for his phone. 911, he gasped into the receiver, trying to stay composed. "My mom, she's not breathing." The dispatcher guided him through CPR. He followed every instruction, pressing his hands into her chest, counting between compressions. But in the pit of his stomach, he already knew. She was gone. When paramedics arrived minutes later, they took over immediately. Ethan stepped back, watching with wide, unblinking eyes as strangers knelt over his mother. Machines beeped. Voices were exchanged in low, urgent tones. But nothing worked. A moment later, one of them looked up and gave a quiet, solemn nod. Time of death, 2:42 p.m. Ethan stood in the hallway, numb, staring at the bathroom door. Just that morning, they had eaten breakfast together. She had reminded him to bring a jacket for the cool evening. She had laughed at something on the news. And now she was gone. They called it natural causes. The initial assumption was perhaps cardiac arrest or a stroke. There was no trauma to the body. No blood. No signs of violence. But Ethan couldn't let go of the nagging feeling in his chest. Something felt off. He couldn't name it yet, not exactly. But it was there. In the way her jewelry was still on her wrists. In the strange position of her body in the tub. In the folded bath mat that should have been laid flat. It was in the silence that followed. That evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table while his older sister, Monique, returned home from her nursing rotation. He told her everything. She listened, wide-eyed, still in scrubs, as he replayed every detail. "I called him too," Ethan said quietly. "Nathan." He didn't answer. Nathan Parker, their older brother. The golden child. The one with the shiny girlfriend, The polished Instagram page, the luxury car in every photo. He lived across town but hadn't been home in days. He hadn't even replied to Monique's texts about their mom's graduation last month. I left a message, Ethan added. Told him mom died. Hours later, Nathan finally showed up, with Alyssa and their toddler in tow. He didn't cry. He didn't ask questions. He didn't say much at all. Just stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, staring at the floor. Something about his presence made Ethan uneasy. Maybe it was the calmness. Maybe it was the way he kept looking at his phone. Or maybe it was the way he asked minutes later, "Has anyone contacted her life insurance yet?" Ethan didn't know what to make of it then. But the feeling, like something dark had crept into their home and left the door open, would only grow in the days to come. In the days following Teresa Parker's death, the house that had once been filled with warmth now felt like a museum of her memory, too quiet, too still, as if time itself had paused in disbelief. The neighborhood was used to seeing Teresa on her front porch, watering her potted herbs or waving at the mailman. She always smiled, always had a kind word. She was the kind of person who remembered birthdays, sent thank you notes, and never missed a school event, even when she was exhausted from working double shifts. Teresa had been many things in her lifetime: a daughter, a sister, a public school teacher, and most notably, a single mother of 4. After her divorce in 2008, when her husband abruptly left the family and moved out of state, she didn't fall apart. She simply tightened her grip on life and moved forward, like she always did. She took on extra tutoring hours, clipped coupons religiously, and learned how to fix a leaky faucet from YouTube just to save on a plumber. Every Christmas, she somehow made it magical with nothing but patience and clever budgeting. Each of her children had a different memory of her strength. For Ethan, it was the way she always made him a grilled cheese sandwich after a rough day at school. For Monique, it was the nights they sat up going through anatomy flashcards together. For Julian, the oldest, it was how she fought to keep him in college even when the tuition bills nearly broke them. And for Nathan, well, he used to say it was how she never gave up on him, even when he made mistakes. Even in her late 50s, Teresa wasn't finished growing. She had dreams too, quiet, modest ones that had been tucked away for decades. At 56, she enrolled in night classes at a community college. She told no one at first, not even her children. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to become a licensed caregiver, to work in elder care. "There's always someone who needs help," she said. It took her 3 years, balancing work, family, and late-night studying, but in early spring, she graduated. Her kids posted the graduation photo online. Teresa in a navy blue cap and gown, smiling beside a large class of 2024 sign. The post got hundreds of likes. Comments flooded in. "Your mom is amazing. Total inspiration. A real-life superhero." But behind the smiles, there was exhaustion. Behind the graduation photo, there was sacrifice. She'd paid for her final semester by cashing out her emergency fund. She declined a celebration dinner so she could help Monique cover her nursing exam fees. When Ethan asked why she wasn't buying a new phone even though hers had a cracked screen, she said, "I'll get one later. Phones don't save lives." She was scheduled to start her new job the following week at a small assisted living facility just 3 miles from home. She had already bought her new scrubs, simple teal and lavender pairs, neatly folded in her closet. The welcome packet was still on the dining table the day she died. Everyone who knew Teresa described her the same way: grounded, cautious, and selfless. That was why her death didn't make sense. She wasn't sick, Monique said to the coroner when they called with the preliminary report. She didn't drink, didn't use pills. No history of fainting. She was fine that morning, laughing, drinking coffee, and yet, the official cause remained undetermined. No trauma, no injury, no sign of foul play. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the details. Her gold watch, the one she always removed before showering, was still on her wrist. Her necklace hadn't been taken off. The anti-slip mat was dry and folded against the tub wall. These weren't the habits of someone who had been preparing to bathe. And Nathan hadn't cried. At the wake, Teresa's friends came in clusters. Neighbors, former coworkers, church volunteers. They spoke of how Teresa never missed the 8 a.m. service, how she'd bring extra muffins to the food pantry. They hugged the children, offered prayers, and left flowers. But Nathan kept to himself. He leaned against a far wall, phone in hand, replying to someone via text. "Grief looks different for everyone," Julian said, trying to make sense of it. But Monique saw more. She caught the look on Nathan's face when a guest mentioned Teresa's life insurance policy, as if something had clicked. Days later, that suspicion grew. Julian was organizing paperwork at the house. He opened the locked filing cabinet where Teresa kept her important documents. Inside were the usual utility bills, medical records, and report cards from years past. But one thing was missing. Actually, several things. Her driver's license, her social security card, her birth certificate, and the old will. "Did you take any of this?" he asked Monique. She hadn't. Neither had Ethan. But when they asked Nathan, he answered casually, "I've got it. I was helping sort out her estate. Didn't think it was a big deal." What he didn't mention was that he had also requested a mail redirection from USPS. All of Teresa's correspondence, medical bills, bank statements, official letters, was now being sent to Nathan's apartment address across town. It didn't make sense. Monique still lived in the house. So did Ethan. Why forward all mail to a place where Teresa never lived? Why not just leave it here? Monique asked. Nathan shrugged. Just easier. But it wasn't easier. It was controlled. And that control was starting to feel deliberate. A week later, a call came from a life insurance company. Not to express condolences, but to report something strange. And from that moment on, Teresa's death was no longer just a tragedy. It was the beginning of an investigation. At first glance, Nathan Parker had it all. Scroll through his girlfriend's Instagram, and you'd think you were witnessing the modern American dream. Alyssa Monroe, with her bronzed skin and million-dollar smile, stood on beaches in Bali, drank oat milk lattes in rooftop cafes, and posed beside sleek white SUVs. Her followers adored her, 2.3 million and counting. And Nathan? He was always there, just behind the frame. Never the center of attention, but always present. Holding the baby, adjusting the camera, handing her sunglasses before the next shoot. Their fans called them #FamilyGoals. Some even messaged Nathan to say he was lucky. She's a queen and you're her king. But if you looked closely, the cracks were there. The rented house in the suburbs they used as a backdrop for their content? Not theirs. They were leasing it for $3,800 a month, a stretch by any measure. The white Range Rover? Still under finance. The candlelit dinners and five-star hotel stays? Mostly comped by brands in exchange for exposure. Alyssa handled the audience. Nathan handled the deals. He called himself a digital strategist. But behind the title was a man earning less than $20,000 a year, working 80-hour weeks, negotiating ad rates, fixing editing software, managing DMs, emails, invoices. No salary. No benefits. No recognition. What they had looked glamorous from the outside. But inside, the pressure to maintain the image was relentless. They didn't just sell clothes or skincare. They sold perfection. And perfection doesn't allow for weakness or failure. In truth, Nathan hadn't always lived in curated light. He used to study finance at UCLA. Smart, promising, focused. His mother, Teresa, used to say, "He's the numbers one. Always organizing, always planning." But halfway through junior year, he dropped out. He said he needed time to think. In reality, he had fallen hard, for Alyssa, and for the world she was building. She wasn't famous then. Just a receptionist at a fitness center with a side hustle of selfies. But Nathan saw potential. She had a sharp eye for lighting, angles, captions. She understood algorithms before they taught courses on them. So he made a decision. He left college. Moved into a shared apartment with her. Helped her shoot content. Built spreadsheets. Ran ad campaigns. Pitched to brands. Within 2 years, Alyssa Monroe became one of the top lifestyle influencers in Southern California. Nathan never looked back. But Teresa had her doubts. She wasn't against ambition. She admired determination. But she also understood volatility, and she saw how fast internet fame could turn. She once told her sister, "It's like trying to build a future out of glitter. One gust of wind and it's gone." Still, she never tried to stop him. She stayed supportive. She offered to help him file taxes, sent groceries during dry months, watched every sponsored video, even if she didn't understand half of what was being sold. Because that's what mothers do, they hope even when they worry. But something changed after 2020. Nathan stopped replying to her texts as quickly. He canceled visits. He no longer asked for advice. Teresa sensed it but didn't pry. "He's busy," she told Ethan. "He's got a family now." And he did. In 2021, Alyssa gave birth to their son, Mason. The baby became a new character in the brand story. Every milestone, first tooth, first steps, first birthday, was shared online with a filter and a hashtag. Companies lined up to sponsor diapers, organic baby food, matching outfits. Nathan embraced the role of Insta-dad. But privately, the weight of that image crushed him. His crypto investments were tanking. He was behind on rent. Credit cards maxed. And yet, every week, he had to smile on camera and pretend like everything was perfect. Because that's what they'd sold. Not just products, but a fantasy. By early 2024, the facade was buckling. Nathan owed over $90,000. And growing. The IRS had begun sending letters. Alyssa didn't know everything. He kept certain things compartmentalized. He believed, truly, that if he could just hold on a bit longer, the next sponsorship, the next algorithm bump, the next coin surge, something would break in their favor. That's when he started talking about life insurance. At first, it seemed innocent. He asked Teresa, gently, if she'd ever considered setting up policies just in case. He framed it like financial planning. "I just worry," he said. "What if something happened to you?" It'd help cover the house, help Ethan and Monique. She was surprised. Flattered, maybe, but firm. "I've got enough saved," she told him. "And whatever I have will be divided evenly. That's how your father and I planned it, and that's how I intend to keep it." That conversation ended. Or so she thought. What she didn't know was that within days, Nathan submitted applications to 3 separate insurance companies, using her name without her knowledge. The policies totaled over $1.1 million, with Nathan as the sole beneficiary. He forged the signatures, submitted digital copies of Teresa's ID, pieced together from scans he had access to, added fake contact numbers for verifications. He even uploaded a typed health declaration stating Teresa had no significant conditions, omitting her minor thyroid disorder and occasional heart palpitations. He was meticulous, focused, strategic. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a project, a solution, an exit plan. The payout, if successful, would erase all his debts, buy him time, secure his family's image. He believed it wasn't theft. It was survival. In his eyes, Teresa didn't have to die. But if she did, at least something good would come of it. This is what prosecutors would later describe as the most chilling aspect, the emotional detachment. That in between video shoots and brand deals, Nathan sat in silence at night, filling out insurance documents with his mother's name. That he looked at her graduation photos and didn't see pride, but potential profit. And then on May 6th, she was gone. Just like that. The funeral was small, quiet, and for many, unfinished. There were flowers, yes, white lilies and pale roses lined the edges of the altar. There were speeches. Monique read a passage Teresa had once highlighted in a book about second chances. Julian spoke of her strength. Ethan couldn't speak at all. But Nathan said nothing. He stood in the back row, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, his hand resting on the shoulder of Alyssa. He didn't cry. He didn't touch the casket. He didn't linger after the service. He was the first to leave. That evening, as Monique and Julian prepared dinner in their mother's kitchen, a quiet act of defiance against the grief, an email arrived in Julian's inbox. It was from a legal firm. The subject line read, "Estate documents, Teresa Parker." Attached was a digital copy of a new will. It was brief, dated April 29th, just 1 week before Teresa's death. The contents were shocking. In it, she declared her entire estate, including her modest savings, car, and the house in Santa Clarita, was to be left solely to Nathan Parker. None of the other 3 children were mentioned. Julian blinked at the screen, unsure if he was reading it right. "It can't be real," Monique whispered, reading over his shoulder. "It's not," he replied. The will was typed and signed in ink and came with a notarized audio recording labeled, "Teresa Parker, Testament Statement." They opened the file. A woman's voice filled the room, calm and measured. "I, Teresa Parker, being of sound mind and body." But Julian didn't flinch from the words. He flinched from the tone. It wasn't right. It was her voice, but it wasn't. "It sounds like her," Ethan later said. "But too clean. Too flat." The truth would surface weeks later. When forensic experts examined the audio, it was AI-generated, a voice clone created from clips of Teresa's voicemail greetings, YouTube videos from her nursing class, and years of archived family footage. Nathan had fed her voice into a synthetic voice generator and manufactured her last words. That alone would have been damning. But it wasn't all. Because just as Julian was digesting the fake will, another thread unraveled. A call came from Bridgestone Mutual, a mid-sized insurance company operating out of Colorado. The agent's voice was polite, but alert. "We just have a few follow-up questions regarding the recent claim filed on behalf of Ms. Teresa Parker's policy," she said. Julian blinked. "Policy?" "Yes," she replied. "Filed by the named beneficiary, Mr. Nathan Parker." Julian said nothing. The agent continued, "Just verifying, were you aware your mother held a $400,000 life insurance policy, activated last month?" "No," he said. "Absolutely not." 2 days later, a second company called Cedar Grove Life. Another $350,000 policy. Then a third, Western Prairie Insurance, $425,000. 3 separate companies. 3 separate policies. All initiated within a 10-day span, all listing Nathan Parker as the sole beneficiary. The total value? $1.175 million. Julian hung up and sat in silence for a long time. When he confronted Nathan the next day, Nathan didn't deny it. "She wanted me to do it," Nathan said flatly. "Mom knew she was getting older. She didn't want you guys to deal with debt or stress. I was handling everything for her." Monique stared at him. "So why didn't she tell us? Why just you?" Nathan shrugged. "Because I was the only one who asked." But Julian wasn't buying it. Neither was Ethan. Then came the paperwork. The insurance companies, growing increasingly suspicious due to the close proximity of policy dates and Teresa's sudden death, began digging deeper. They requested medical records, identification, confirmation of Teresa's signature, and cause of death documentation. Nathan submitted them, confidently. But one document caught the eye of a claims adjuster. The birth date was wrong. The application listed July 4, 1996, Nathan's own birthday, not Teresa's. A second document, her medical attestation, looked off. The font was slightly different. The doctor's signature was blurred, and the document number didn't match any registered health network. And the most glaring error? One of the forms stated Teresa had passed due to subarachnoid hemorrhage due to aneurysm rupture, a specific, medically defined cause. But the coroner's office, under oath, had listed undetermined on the official death certificate. The inconsistencies raised red flags across the board. One by one, all 3 companies froze the claims, pending formal investigation. At this point, local authorities were notified. The Santa Clarita Police Department contacted the family. A detective named Carla Ruiz met with Julian and Monique. "We're not saying this is a criminal matter yet," she said. "But something isn't adding up." Julian handed over everything: the fake will, the forged documents, the AI voice recording. Detective Ruiz stared at the folder. "If this is what it looks like, your brother might be in very serious trouble." Still, there were missing pieces. No signs of forced entry. No clear physical trauma. No witnesses. But Teresa's habits, her careful routines, became the silent testimony. Julian walked Ruiz through the bathroom, showed her the drawer where the anti-slip mat was normally kept, always laid out. He showed her where Teresa stored her watch and jewelry, never worn during showers. He showed the folder of old insurance documents, none of which named Nathan as a beneficiary. He pulled up text messages, call logs, voice notes, all suggesting nothing about Teresa preparing to change her estate. "She didn't do this," Monique said quietly. "He did." Still, proving murder was different than proving fraud. The line between a tragic accident and a calculated killing was razor thin, and they needed more. But what they had now was enough to escalate the case from civil dispute to active criminal investigation. And somewhere in the middle of all that paper, signatures, and digital footprints was the final piece, a motive worth over $1 million. Long before detectives began assembling evidence, Teresa Parker had already left behind her own quiet warnings, hidden in the details of her daily life. She was a creature of pattern, not out of compulsion, but of purpose. Every routine was her way of holding order in a world that often tried to pull her apart. After years of raising 4 children alone, routines became her armor. She did things the same way every day, not because she feared change, but because predictability gave her control. She brewed her coffee at 7:05 a.m. sharp. Always 2 scoops. Always with almond milk. She wore the same pair of earrings to church every Sunday, tiny gold hoops, a gift from her own mother. She bathed before dinner, never after. Always removed her jewelry. Always laid down the anti-slip mat. Always hung her robe neatly on the back of the door. So when Ethan described what he saw that day, the robe soaked and clinging to her body, the jewelry still on, the mat folded and untouched, Monique knew immediately. "She didn't get in the shower herself," she said quietly. "Someone put her there." Detective Carla Ruiz didn't dismiss the idea. In fact, she encouraged Monique and Ethan to walk her through Teresa's routine again and again, until the inconsistencies became impossible to ignore. First, there was the watch. Teresa's gold citizen wristwatch wasn't just jewelry. It was sentimental, passed down from her father, a man she'd adored. She never wore it in the shower. The steam would tarnish the band, she always said. Yet when Ethan found her body, the watch was still wrapped around her wrist, dripping wet. Second, the necklace. A modest silver pendant with the initials of her 4 children engraved on it. She took it off every time she showered, kept it in a small ceramic bowl on the bathroom counter. But it was still clasped around her neck when paramedics arrived. Third, the mat. Julian remembered the conversation vividly, years ago, when she'd slipped once getting out of the tub. After that, she never showered without placing the rubber mat down first. It was always the first thing she did, habit, instinct. Yet on the day she died, it was still curled dry on the side of the bathtub. And then there was the temperature. Ethan had noted it first but hadn't understood its weight. The shower water had still been running when he found her, but her skin was ice cold. That puzzled the EMTs too. Hot water. Closed bathroom. No ventilation. And yet she wasn't even warm to the touch. Rigor mortis hadn't fully set in, but the cooling of her body suggested she had died long before the moment Ethan walked in. If she had been in there alive, under hot water for any significant amount of time, her body temperature wouldn't have dropped that quickly. It didn't add up. And then came the strangest part, the door. According to Ethan, the bathroom door had been almost completely closed, but not locked. That alone wasn't suspicious. Teresa rarely locked the door when home alone. But the latch? It was slightly bent, as if forced. Not broken, just stressed. Ruiz made a note. "A door can be pushed open with enough pressure," she said. "Especially if someone doesn't want it to lock again." At this point, all the elements were circling the same gravity. Something happened in that bathroom that wasn't accidental. But without direct evidence, no bruises, no abrasions, no defensive wounds, the investigation was still stalled. Until the neighbor came forward. Mrs. Collier, who lived across the street, was an observant widow in her 70s who spent most mornings tending to her garden. She hadn't been interviewed initially because there were no witnesses expected in what was believed to be a natural death. But when Monique spoke to her about the funeral arrangements, she casually mentioned something odd. I saw Nathan's car in your driveway that day, she said. Around lunchtime. Surprised me, he hasn't been by in months. Monique froze. Are you sure? I'm old, not blind, Mrs. Collier replied. That white SUV with the black trim. I remember because it was blocking the sidewalk a little. I had to walk around it. Ruiz checked the street security footage. At 12:36 p.m. on May 6th, a white 2021 Range Rover with black wheels pulled into Teresa Parker's driveway. Nathan Parker was inside. It stayed for exactly 47 minutes. He never mentioned it to anyone. Not to Ethan. Not to Monique. Not even at the funeral. And yet, just 5 hours later, Teresa was dead. Detective Ruiz filed for a formal subpoena. When questioned again, Nathan finally admitted to stopping by. Yes, he said. I was there. She asked me to come over. We talked about estate stuff. She was getting worried about the future. And did she mention anything about feeling unwell? Ruiz asked. Nathan hesitated. She said she was tired. Said she felt like life was getting too heavy. That maybe it was time to make plans. He looked down. His voice softened. She even joked that if anything ever happened, at least I knew what to do. Ruiz took notes. And you didn't think that was worth sharing when we first spoke? I didn't want to make it worse for my siblings, he said. Didn't want them thinking she was giving up. But Ruiz had heard that type of deflection before. And she wasn't convinced. Especially when Gracie, Alyssa Monroe's cousin, who had been staying with the couple that week, offered a different version of the timeline. He was gone for hours that day, she told police. Alyssa kept texting him. She called like a dozen times. He didn't answer until almost 2 p.m. Phone records confirmed it. Nathan's phone received 12 missed calls from Alyssa between 12:45 and 1:50 p.m. And his first message back? 2:01 p.m., all good. Just got caught up. But Teresa was pronounced dead at 2:42 p.m. And Ethan had called 911 at 2:17 p.m. Meaning Nathan had sent that message after his mother had already died, and after he'd left the scene. It was more than a broken routine now. It was a timeline with teeth. A clock ticking backward. And every second was pointing to the same person. When the investigation reached its tipping point, Detective Carla Ruiz knew instinct wasn't enough. She needed Nathan to speak, freely, casually, when he didn't think anyone was listening. With a judge's warrant secured under growing suspicion of fraud, obstruction, and potential homicide, Ruiz initiated what would later be called Phase 3 of the case. A covert surveillance operation. Over the course of 2 quiet days in early June, technicians entered the apartment Nathan shared with Alyssa Monroe under the guise of a city inspection. With precision and speed, they planted 2 high-sensitivity audio devices and a miniature surveillance camera inside the living room smoke detector. The goal wasn't just to catch Nathan admitting guilt. It was to watch how he talked, how he rationalized, denied, or distanced himself from the truth when the door was closed and the cameras of Instagram were off. For the next 91 days, the surveillance fed into a secure server. At first, it captured only mundane conversations, discussions about laundry, groceries, filming schedules, toddler tantrums, quiet dinners. But as the pressure from insurance companies mounted and word of a possible police inquiry reached Nathan's inbox, the tone inside the apartment changed. The first moment of fracture came one Thursday night, around 10:17 p.m. Nathan sat on the couch, laptop open, scrolling through an insurance claim portal. His voice, low and tense, broke the quiet. "They're stalling on purpose," he muttered. "If they deny it, I swear to God I'll..." Alyssa, seated across the room applying skincare serum, looked up. "Deny what?" she asked. Nathan hesitated, then closed the laptop slowly. "The payout," he said. "They think something's off. One of the companies flagged the medical report." Alyssa frowned. "Which report?" Silence. Then, in a voice barely audible, "The one I sent. I maybe had to tweak a few things." She stared at him. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer right away. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, face buried in his hands. "Look," he finally said, "I didn't do anything wrong. I just made sure they'd process it faster. It's what anyone would do if they needed it bad enough. Alyssa's voice sharpened. You forged her medical documents? He stood up, pacing. I edited what was already there. That's different. Nathan, she said, slowly, are you telling me you faked documents about your mom's death? Is that what this is? It's not like that, he shot back. You weren't there. You don't know what it's been like. I was drowning, okay? I had to make it work. Then came the words that would change everything. If you killed your mom, Alyssa whispered, and they find out, you'll go to prison. The apartment went still. For a full 12 seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Nathan said, they won't. I planned everything. She was alone. I was careful. They don't have anything. Just bad timing and assumptions. Oh my God, she breathed. Nathan, what do you want me to say? He snapped. That I regret it? That I didn't think about the money? I did. I thought about all of it. I thought about you. About Mason. About getting us out of this mess. He lowered his voice. I thought I could fix everything. From the hallway, the hidden microphone captured Alyssa's breath catching in her throat. Later that night, when the baby had been put to bed, she tried again. She asked about the fake will. He didn't deny it. He claimed Teresa had asked him to prepare it, that she didn't want the other children burdened with decisions. That she trusted him most. But when Alyssa asked why he never told anyone, why no one else had seen a shred of that conversation, Nathan grew defensive. Because they never saw the pressure. They don't know what it's like to keep things going, to be the reason the lights stay on. He leaned against the wall, exhaling sharply. This wasn't murder. It was practical. In a later recording, 2 days after receiving an email from Cedar Grove Life suspending the payout, Nathan called a contact he referred to only as Rick, possibly a lawyer or former classmate. The conversation was brief but telling. So hypothetically, if someone submitted a claim and there were minor discrepancies, but no actual physical evidence of foul play, what's the worst-case scenario? The voice on the other end answered flatly. If it's discovered as intentional fraud and there's even implied involvement in a suspicious death, you're not just looking at denial. You're looking at prison time. Federal. Nathan ended the call without replying. Meanwhile, investigators were listening to everything. The final piece came when Alyssa, visibly shaken and fearful of being dragged into a conspiracy, contacted Detective Ruiz directly. In a recorded interview, she said, "He never told me about the insurance. I didn't even know there were policies until after the funeral. I found a folder on his laptop. Medical reports, PDFs, signatures. Some had file names like final_ver4_tskin. I knew something was wrong, but I was afraid." She handed over Nathan's external hard drive, where deleted documents were recovered by forensic analysts. Among them, a PDF version of the forged will. The original insurance application with Teresa's name but Nathan's birthday. A file labeled voiceclip_mix.wave, a constructed AI recording of Teresa's voice reading testament clauses. A spreadsheet listing potential payouts and estimated timelines. A memo titled Contingency Plan, Australia. That last one outlined a rough strategy for leaving the US should all 3 insurance claims be approved, including new banking information and a flight itinerary dated for mid-September. By then, the noose was already tightening. With Alyssa's cooperation, Detective Ruiz obtained a full arrest warrant. On the morning of November 2, 2024, Nathan Parker was arrested at his apartment on multiple counts: first-degree murder, insurance fraud, forgery, and obstruction of justice. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He simply turned off the camera ring light by the door and stepped outside. The courtroom was silent as Nathan Parker entered in cuffs, wearing a plain gray jumpsuit. It had been nearly 2 years since Teresa Parker's death. In that time, her name had gone from a line in an obituary to the center of one of California's most unnerving family crime cases in a decade. The public couldn't look away. News outlets dubbed it the Instagram Sun case. Social media, ironically, exploded with commentary. Some still defended Nathan, saying he was pressured by modern expectations. Others called him a man who killed his past to save his image. But inside the courtroom of Los Angeles County Superior Court, none of that mattered. What mattered were the facts, and whether the state could prove that what looked like a tragedy was, in fact, a cold, calculated act of murder. The prosecution came prepared. They began by constructing a timeline, detailing how Nathan had visited his mother on May 6, left without informing anyone, and then filed 3 life insurance claims within 36 hours of her death. They presented the forged documents, the will excluding all siblings but him. The AI-generated voice recording, labeled Teresa_Final Dem4A. The mismatched birth date on the insurance form. The digital trail on Nathan's hard drive, including a spreadsheet outlining payout stages and a relocation plan titled simply Australia. Then came the audio recordings. Played aloud for the court, the voice of Alyssa Monroe trembled as she asked, "If you killed your mom and they find out, you'll go to prison." And Nathan's reply, flat, almost bored, "They won't. I planned everything." The jury sat motionless. There was no confession in the traditional sense. No, I did it. But the implications were clear. The cold language, the lack of remorse, and the strategic language Nathan used painted a picture not of grief, but of opportunism. The defense had little to work with. Their strategy was simple. They claimed Teresa had agreed to everything. That she had signed the will. That she trusted Nathan more than the others. That the recordings were taken out of context. A son venting under stress, not confessing murder. They tried to redirect blame toward ambiguous medical conditions, suggesting Teresa could have suffered a sudden cardiac event or aneurysm. But the coroner was called to the stand. Under oath, she reiterated, "The cause of death remains officially undetermined." However, the cooling of the body, absence of trauma, and lack of known conditions consistent with such a sudden collapse suggest unnatural causes cannot be ruled out. One chilling phrase stuck with the jury. If someone had held her down, covered her mouth while she was under running water, there would be no marks. No noise. Just silence. The prosecution's theory didn't need a murder weapon. It had motive. It had opportunity. It had deception and the paper trail to prove it. Julian Parker, the eldest sibling, was called to testify. He brought with him copies of their mother's real will, dated 2019, which named all 4 children equally. He described the filing cabinet where key documents had gone missing, and the moment he discovered Nathan had redirected their mother's mail without telling anyone. His voice cracked only once, when he said, "I used to think he was the responsible one, the one Mom could count on." Then Ethan, the boy who found his mother in the bathroom. Now 20, pale and reserved, he recounted that day again, slowly, without dramatics. "The water was hot," he said, "but she was ice cold. And the mat wasn't down. And her jewelry, she never. He couldn't finish the sentence. But he didn't need to. The trial lasted 8 weeks. Nathan never took the stand. He sat silently behind his defense team, never once looking toward his siblings. Not during testimony. Not during verdict. Not even when the bailiff brought him water. On December 5, 2024, the jury returned after 2 days of deliberation. Guilty. First-degree murder. 3 counts of insurance fraud. 2 counts of felony forgery. 1 count of obstruction. As the sentence was read aloud, Nathan showed no emotion. He simply stared ahead. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Monique spoke briefly. "She gave everything she had to raise us. She deserved peace, not betrayal." Julian simply said, "This wasn't justice. It was consequence. Justice would have been her still alive." In the months that followed, the Instagram account once filled with filtered smiles and luxury shots quietly disappeared. Alyssa deleted every photo of Nathan. She issued one statement. "I was blinded by love and image. I'm still processing the reality." Teresa's old house was put up for sale. The proceeds split among the remaining siblings, according to her original will. Ethan went back to college. Monique became a nurse. And Nathan, once the quiet strength behind the scenes, became a cautionary tale, not just of murder, but of a life hollowed by appearances. A man who replaced his mother's love with metrics, sponsorships, and a desperate need to maintain a fantasy until it consumed him.